watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hey everyone, and welcome back into another episode of Roll Tide Daily. On this beautiful Tuesday afternoon, we're coming to you live from Atlanta, Georgia. Appreciate you guys already chiming in the comment section. A lot of you guys already with us on a daily basis. We always appreciate you guys' comments, questions, everything else rolling in on the Facebook page, on the YouTube page. So appreciate you guys stepping up with us again today. Please, if you'll remember to share the video. We love having the conversation of Roll Tide Daily. A lot of good stuff coming up today. We're going to talk a little bit about Bama's most important impact freshman, what could be Patrick Surtain Jr. Going to highlight a little bit of Alabama's opponent rankings coming out really from Athlon's, the way they see things playing out this year. Going to bring in SEC Country, or former SEC Country, Mark Burnett, correspondent, beat writer for Alabama. He's going to answer some questions along with us throughout the show. Then later on at the end of the show, we're going to talk about Julio Jones getting ranked number 4 in the NFL. We don't do a lot of NFL stuff on the show, but Julio Jones being ranked number 4 player in the NFL, kind of a big deal for Alabama as the outlook begins. Nicole Thornton, Doug Cooper, Dennis Shirley, Larry Pate. A lot of you guys already weighing in with the Roll Tides. Appreciate you guys logging on and hanging out with us for the next 30 minutes. As always, like I said, please share the show. We love starting the conversation up. I also want to start with the question of the day. Now, this question of the day is a little bit loaded. I want to make sure that we go ahead and lay that out there. This is a little bit loaded. I don't want all chalk coming in on the question of the day today. The obvious answer to this question could possibly be Tua Tagovailoa, if you think Tua is going to be the starting quarterback. But let's throw a few curveballs in there if we can. Question of the day, who's going to be the most important first-year starter at Alabama in 2018? It could obviously be Tua Tagovailoa. Let's not forget Patrick Surtain. Let's not forget Dylan Moses. Let's not forget Terrell Lewis, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, there's a number of other guys to go with. Let's not go all chalk with Tua Tagovailoa, but it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic of people that weigh in on that conversation. It could be Tua, it could be Jalen. I mean, obviously it can't be Jalen, but Tua and Jalen obviously batting it out for the quarterback position, so it's going to be interesting to get you guys kind of responses. Brandon Bird weighing in, Roll Tide. Barbara Corbin, Roll Tide, roll. Chris McLeod, let's go 78. That's me. Appreciate you remembering that number from back in the day. James Perkins, Roll Tide, and a lot of you guys continuing. Jeff and Debbie Logan weighing in. Matt Merle says Surtain's going to be the biggest first-year starter for Alabama. We're definitely going to get into that a little bit later. But first, let's get rolling, too. I want to highlight Athlon's opponent rankings for Alabama. Now, obviously, these are just rankings in terms of top 25, top 130, really, when you rank out all the Division I teams. But it is interesting to kind of put them all in order 12-1 as we kind of count down for where we expect Bama's really promise to be. I mentioned to you, a couple of weeks ago, I expect Bama's toughest opponent in 2018 to actually be the LSU Tigers. Athlon has ranked all the opponents all the way 1 through 30 of Division I football teams. Obviously, Citadel not being an FBS team, they're an FCS team, so they're ranked number 12. But I think we have the graphic to show you guys of all the rankings. Opponents 12-1 for Alabama in the 2018 season. There you got Citadel at 12. Louisiana Lafayette sitting there at number 11. Now 10 Arkansas State and 9 Arkansas is a little bit poetic for a lot of people around the SEC looking at the Arkansas Razorbacks to kind of come back to what they once were. But this kind of highlights the fact that Chad Morris has an uphill climb in front of him. 8 Ole Miss. I feel like they're a little bit underrated here. We highlighted that a couple of days ago. Greg Little and Jordan Ta'amu, A.J. Brown, they're going to have a nice passing attack. 7, the Fighting Jeremy Pruitt's up there in Knoxville. They're going to have an interesting ranking. Louisville minus Lamar Jackson. Missouri sitting there at 5 with Drew Lock, a Heisman Trophy candidate, coming in. Now, this is where it gets interesting to me, too, here. For LSU. Now, this does not take into effect where you're playing the game. Doesn't take into effect matchups. It doesn't tell you who has a quarterback and who doesn't. These are just the rankings, 12-1 of the opponents on Bama's schedule. But for you have their LSU. They're going to be sitting right there on the rim of the top 25, maybe out of the top 25, maybe in the 25. Then you get Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and Auburn. But I want to go back to LSU and make sure we highlight that one because I honestly think that LSU is going to be one of the toughest games. It's never an easy trip to go down to Baton Rouge. It's never an easy trip. Doesn't matter if it's Ed Orgeron, Les Miles. Doesn't matter if Nick Saban's the head coach. It's no fun to go down to Baton Rouge and play that game. So that's an interesting one to highlight there at number 4. I think it's also interesting to look at number 3, Texas A&M, the Fighting Jimbo Fishers coming out of College Station. They're going to make the return trip to Tuscaloosa this year. Obviously, Bama not having to make that trip over to College Station makes that game a little more manageable. You guys remember a couple of years ago, that's an absolute blowout with Kevin Sumlin still at the helm. Obviously, that's going to be one of those games Bama's hoping to notch off against another Nick Saban assistant there in Jimbo Fisher. Then Mississippi State. I think this is a little bit of a head scratcher to me. I've kind of questioned why Mississippi State is so high in a lot of these rankings. Listen, I know they're returning 18 of 22 starters. I know that a lot of people think Joe Moorhead's a great head coach. I know that Nick Fitzgerald's going to be back from his injury from last year. And I know they have an above-average defensive line. But you can't look at LSU, Texas A&M, possibly Missouri, and the other teams on that schedule and tell me that Mississippi State's going to be the second highest-ranked opponent by the time Bama faces them. Remember, this is a Mississippi State team that hasn't beaten Bama since I was in college back in 2007. So that's one thing to always keep in touch with. The final thing for me on this list as we go 12 through 1, there you have Auburn sitting there at number 1. I got to be honest with you guys, and this is an Alabama show. This is Roll Tide Daily, so I can go ahead and throw this out there. Auburn does not scare me this year. Auburn as a football team does not scare me coming into Tuscaloosa. It's been since 2010 that Auburn's been able to come into Tuscaloosa. I know they beat Alabama last year. I know they won the SEC West. You just can't tell me that Gus Malzahn and Jared Stidham can pull it off 2 years in a row, coming into Tuscaloosa and being able to beat a pretty good Alabama football team, especially one at that point in the year with a very, very seasoned secondary. I don't think that's going to be on my kind of watch list in terms of opponents that can possibly knock it off. Now, you're going to go through the offseason. You're going to hear a lot of people talk about Auburn. You're going to hear people highlight the Iron Bowl, saying it's always national relevant. It's always one of those games Alabama has to get through. Yes, it does. And listen, Gus Malzahn's proven that he has the ability to beat a Nick Saban coach football team. This just isn't one of those teams that's going to be, in my mind, by the time we get to late November, one of those teams that's going to be in a position for me. I think they'll have already played their way out of being in the SEC West race. I think a seasoned secondary and a seasoned Alabama defense at that point, with all the speed you're going to see, is going to be a tough task for them coming into Tuscaloosa to be able to beat. Robbie Harris says, I'll have what they're smoking, referring to Athlon Sports for their rankings. I absolutely agree with that. Nicole Thornton saying, I agree, Auburn isn't that scary this year. Now, I'm not saying they're not scary. If we were playing them down in Auburn, it'd be a different kind of topic of conversation, but they're replacing, 3 offensive linemen really this year. They're replacing somebody that was their entire football team when Alabama played them last year, and Kerryon Johnson. I just don't think it's that easy. I don't know if I can give Gus Malzahn that much credit at this point in his coaching career to say, you know what, he's just going to walk straight into Tuscaloosa and kind of walk away from that game. Let's think of some of the games Alabama's played Auburn and Tuscaloosa here in recent years. Honestly, they haven't even been that close. It's been the games down in Auburn that you've really had your head scratch with. Stephen Early saying Auburn can't win on the road. It's proven. Last year they were a D3 school on the road. There were some head scratchers. They lose a game to LSU they absolutely should not have lost. They go on the road to play Clemson in that other Death Valley and give up 11 sacks. Looked terrible in the couple of games they played here in Atlanta up in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So it is a little bit of a head scratcher to what they can really get accomplished in terms of away from Jordan-Hare Stadium next year. Terrence Brandon said, weighing in on Mississippi State, saying State is always ranked heading into the Bama game, then the wheels fall off the rest of the season. Dan Mullen, for all the hype that Dan Mullen gets going on to be the Florida head coach this next year, I think it's the right hire. He never got close, other than this past year in Starkville, really, never got even close to beating a Nick Saban football team there in the SEC West. So I completely agree with that. As you guys talk about Mississippi State and break down some of the other teams. Montrell Dorsey saying, even when Mississippi State is good, we destroy them, minus last year, kind of what I'm saying. Matt Merle saying, I think Missouri should be lower and Ole Miss higher. Listen, I agree with that. I think Ole Miss gives you a puncher's chance. When you talk about their passing game, their wide receiver core, in an empty secondary, that's a good leeway into getting to our next topic here, talking about A.J. Brown. Well, who's going to be guarding A.J. Brown? I think we can roll into this next topic. And I want to highlight something for y'all that came from SI.com, that's SportsIllustrated.com, and some of their writers over there highlighted really what they expect to be the 5 impact freshmen in Division I college football next year. And you can't make that list without including the number 1 cornerback in last year's signing class. That's Patrick Surtain Jr. Out of South Florida. Bama was able to ink him. Really, if y'all remember, if you follow recruiting, they pulled Patrick Surtain Jr. away from Ed Orgeron and LSU right there at the last minute. His teammate Tyson Campbell signs on to play at Georgia, but he decides he wants to, quote, win national championships, and the only place that he was going to go to be able to do that is Alabama. Absolute dagger to the heart to our friends down there in Baton Rouge, and my buddy Shannon Burgess over here in the YouTube comment section. Sorry about that, Shannon. Had to pull out that Patrick Surtain Jr. quote. I think it is interesting to look at, too, and I think we have the quotes of what SI.com had to say about Patrick Surtain Jr., really what they expect from him next year. Alabama needs to replace all the starters in its defensive backfield from last season, and as the number 1 cornerback recruit in the country, Surtain should surpass the 2017 reserves for one of those spots. They'd go on to say Surtain already looks the part. And although the son of an 11-year NFL veteran will have to work to do mastering Nick Saban's defense as he arrives on campus this summer, there's an easy-to-imagine path for him to making an early impact. Now, I think that there has been some DBs that have made early impacts. Go back to my time at Alabama. Drake Kirkpatrick found his way on the field. Mika Fitzpatrick 3 years ago, you guys remember, had a couple of pick sixes really in his true freshman year, made quite the impact. I know that Patrick Surtain Jr. will be looking to kind of follow in those footsteps. Now, who gets moved out of some of these positions, that's also up for grabs. I think you guys remember Trevon Diggs, who was slated to be one of the starting cornerbacks for Alabama in the secondary this year. He only started one game last year before he was removed for Levi Wallace there in the Florida State game. Levi Wallace kind of takes that job and runs with it, has the pick six against Ole Miss, really does some great things in his time on the field as a senior last year for Alabama. Also, Savion Smith, a JUCO corner signee, also originally signed with LSU out of high school. He's going to be slated to start at the opposite cornerback spot. Remember, he's been on campus since January working with this Alabama secondary, so that's going to be an interesting one to follow as well. But I have to agree with them at SportsIllustrated.com. To me, and this is where the question of the day comes from, to me, Patrick Surtain is really what a lot of things hinge on there at Alabama. Can you lock down a guy like A.J. Brown? Can you lock down Stephen Sullivan? Can you lock down a lot of those other things when it comes to that game next year? Really looking forward to some of these great wide receivers that Alabama could possibly be playing. I think that Patrick Surtain and Sports Illustrated obviously highlighting it right there. He's going to play a big role to come. Colin Vesna weighing in the comment section. Savion Smith, there will be higher expectations for him because he has a collegiate experience, albeit limited at the JUCO level. Terrence Branyan also weighing in saying D. Milliner started as a freshman. That was definitely a great throwback right there. Terrence Branyan weighing in on that also. Without further ado, we have our good buddy Mark Burnett on the phone, formerly of SEC Country, and obviously a lot of us around this building right now trying to figure out the next chapter in our lives. But until then, Mark, how's it going, brother? You been doing good?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Like everybody else, figuring out what's going to be next for me, but enjoying these last few days.
Well, if you're like me, still following along, obviously, very closely to the Alabama program, and I know you're there in Tuscaloosa and keeping a close eye on everything going on with that program right now. We've had some interesting topics so far on today's shows. One of the things we did, we ranked the opponents along with Athlon Sports, kind of 12-1 as far as how they project the opponents on Alabama's schedule this year. Number 1 from them was Auburn. Number 2, Mississippi State. 3, Texas A&M. 4, LSU. I mean, Mark, when you look at this schedule, when you look at what 2018 could shape up as being, do you foresee Auburn really being the toughest test for Alabama, or are you like me and you look a different direction and say possibly that trip to Baton Rouge, possibly an A&M team that's going to be better coached coming into Tuscaloosa?
I definitely think it's the trip to Baton Rouge, not necessarily the LSU team. I just think it's the trip to Baton Rouge and what it means playing down there. And it's probably going to be a night game. Those games are always highly contested. I mean, you look at throughout Nick Saban's tenure, going all the way back to 2008, those games have been decided by 7 points or less. A couple of them have gone to overtime. Just real incredible sort of epic battles. And I know people are high on Auburn, and I think they're going to be a good team. But I just think Alabama getting them inside Bryant-Denny Stadium changes everything, in my opinion. So I just don't think that game will be as tough as it looks on paper. I know Auburn beat them last year, but people really need to take in consideration just how tough of a place Jordan-Hare Stadium is to play. I just don't think Auburn would be able to knock off Alabama if Alabama has the home field advantage.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you. When you look at how that game kind of matches up, you look at what they're going to bring to the table. I think a Kerryon Johnson-less Auburn football team better find their offensive stride before late November, and they're coming into Tuscaloosa. Another guy we've kind of highlighted, now I think this has a lot to do with Auburn. I think this has a lot to do with LSU, Ole Miss, Missouri. Really every team that has dominant playmakers out wide, we kind of highlighted what we were talking about in terms of who we expect to be the top newcomer, I guess, for Alabama, or the first-year starter, the top first-year starter for Alabama, obviously aside from Tua. Patrick Surtain Jr., I think you heard us talking about him on your way in. SI.com kind of listed him as one of the possible big newcomers in college football this year. I mean, is Patrick Surtain Jr., in your opinion, the most important newcomer for this Alabama football team, or are you looking elsewhere for that?
I would definitely say Patrick Surtain Jr. is up there, but I think if you're an Alabama fan, you would like for a Trevon Diggs or a Savion Smith to sort of step up at those two cornerback positions and not force the freshmen to have to play. I think you mentioned D. Milliner started as a freshman. If I remember correctly, his freshman year wasn't the best. So it's one of those things where obviously these guys are talented, but it's just hard playing in that secondary as a true freshman, especially playing out wide. The one guy who we saw do it over the last few years, Mika Fitzpatrick plays as a freshman, but he got to play more of a star position and not have as much thrown at him. So one guy I'm looking at is a guy who's going to have a pretty clear, direct path to the field, and that's Hunter Skyler DeLone. I know people love J.K. Scott, but he's gone now, and you're going to need somebody to flip that field if the offense does struggle. And J.K. Scott was a master at doing that. he was a guy who you could always count on to give the defense pretty good field position. So can Skylar DeLong even come close to that, or is it going to be a drop-off in that department? If there's a drop-off, that could be one of those sneaky things that we're not really talking about, not really focusing on, that could be an issue for Alabama this season.
Yeah, now let me ask that question a different way, too, because I do want to encompass the question of the day because it had to do with a lot more than freshmen. Bama's most important first-year starter. Now, I tried to take two off the board for a lot of people in the comment section. They have been weighing in to give me a lot of good names. Some people expecting Iobi Anoma to be a good kind of first-year starter. Now, you could list Jerry Jeudy, you could list Patrick Surtain, Dylan Moses, Terrell Lewis, really, possibly Daniel Wright. Give me your biggest impact first-year starter. I mean, we can obviously say Surtain if you want to, but I think there's another number of people on that list that might pop out to you as well.
Oh, yeah, okay. If you're talking about more than just the freshman, then, yeah, I would look at a guy like Dylan Moses. I'm really excited to see what he and Mac Wilson can do from that inside linebacker spot. I think that, this could be two of the fastest inside linebackers Alabama has had during Nick Saban's tenure. I think both of these guys are very explosive, ball hogs. Dylan Moses, I feel like every game he played in last year, he had 10 tackles, and I hated that he got hurt before the playoffs because I thought he was really going to have a breakout campaign and really sort of put a stamp on why so many people high on him going all the way back to his 8th grade year. So I definitely think Moses is probably the top guy I'm looking forward to seeing from an overall standpoint, because I just think he could be an incredible player, and if you're an Alabama fan, you're excited to have him for 2 full years if he can stay healthy.
Now, I do want to bring you out on a conversation we were having yesterday. Stuart Mandel from The Athletic, he listed his top 5 concerns. He was going through his mailbag and list kind of his top 5 concerns for Alabama. Hey, I think we have the graphic to show people here on Facebook and YouTube as well that are watching. It was interesting to me to look at his top 5, and I'll read them out loud for you, Mark, so you can kind of follow along with us. Number 5 was Saban bungling the Tua Tagovailoa Jalen Hurts situation. Number 4, replacing the entire starting secondary. Remember, that's number 4. Number 3 on his list of reasons Bama might not repeat was Auburn. Number 2, 6 new assistant coaches in one offseason. And number 1, Clemson was, the top of his reasons Bama might not repeat. I didn't really agree with any of his. I kind of scrambled things back up and spit them back out on the other side. Do you think the secondary, or your opinion, or do you have something else? Because the secondary is really kind of at the top of my list. Do you think the secondary, in your opinion, is the biggest reason Bama might not be able to come back and win a national title again in 2018?
See, I kind of go back and forth on the secondary because I think, they're going to be very inexperienced, obviously, but at the same time, I think there's going to be a ton of talent at every position, corner, star, safety. And I also think the front seven, that the pass rush has a chance to be so good. I don't know how long the secondary is even going to have to cover, if we're being completely honest. I don't really think Auburn's going to be that big of a deal. Like I said, I think getting them at Bryant-Denny Stadium is going to swing that one in Alabama's favor. I don't see Nick Saban messing up the Tua Jalen situation. I think if anybody you can trust to make a good decision on that, I think he'll be the guy. Again, I don't see the assistant coaches being that big of a deal either, because we've seen every single year. I mean, look at the 2015 national championship compared to the 2017 national championship coaching staff, basically completely different outside of a couple guys. So we've already seen that happen, and I can't remember a stiff reason, but I think it's one of those things where the only thing I think that can stop Alabama every year is Alabama. Are they going to be focused every single game and not let somebody sneak up on them and knock them out of the hunt late? But even we saw that last year. Auburn thought they were knocked out of the hunt, and they still found a way to get back in there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you bring that up, too, about Alabama beating Alabama, because that kind of goes into our next topic. We've been following along with SI.com, and really their listing of the top 100 players in college football. Bama landing 7 on that list, including Jonah Williams, Raekwon Davis, Mac Wilson, Dylan Moses, Tua Tagovailoa. It goes back to a conversation we've been having all offseason. Is there really anybody in your mind, and the question's going to come up about Georgia and Auburn and LSU and Texas A&M, but is there really any other program right now as we sit that in your mind is getting close to what Alabama is on the national football landscape?
No, I think the biggest difference is, you say in terms of the NFL landscape?
No, the national college football landscape, just in terms of players right now.
No, I think if you look at it, and that was Stewart's other reason, Clemson. I think the biggest difference that you see in Alabama and these other programs is that Alabama can win no matter who the quarterback is. I mean, I just don't see Clemson being the same program without Deshaun Watson. I know they're going to be an incredible team, very talented on defense with everything they brought back, but I don't think it matters if Kelly Bryant isn't going to be the guy who can stretch the field against Alabama. Alabama is the one team in the country, in my opinion, that can consistently win with different quarterbacks. Maybe Ohio State to a degree, but we saw what they did last year in terms of laying a huge egg against Iowa. So I think Alabama is just head and shoulders above in terms of being able to put a complete team on the field despite the quarterback. It's crazy because you think about football from the high school level all the way up to the NFL. You know, who's your quarterback? Who's your quarterback? Alabama's like the one entity that doesn't really matter. It's like, okay, we can talk all about Tua all we want. He's a great player, but at the end of the day, he's gonna be the sole reason that Alabama wins a championship? I don't think so. It's not like the Deshaun Watson situation or a Jameis Winston situation at Florida State. Some of these other guys who have been incredible quarterbacks, and Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, guys who have put their teams on their back. I just don't see that happening at Alabama, despite how much people want to talk about the quarterback. I think it's going to come down to the big uglies like Raekwon Davis, Terrell Lewis, Christian Miller. Those type of guys are going to be what determines Alabama's season, not the quarterback.
Yeah, Mark, that's a perfect leeway into our next topic of conversation, too, because that SI.com list that did come out, Jonah Williams is really the highest-ranked player from Alabama. In your eyes, is Jonah Williams the best player for Alabama, or do you look at a Mack Wilson, or do you look at somebody else on offense, possibly a Jerry Jeudy or a Damian Harris or a Raekwon Davis up front on D? Do you think Jonah Williams is the best player on the roster, or are you looking somewhere? Be careful now, Mark, because I'm an offensive lineman. Don't hurt my feelings here, man.
Hey, listen, it's funny because I'm not going to lie. Heading into the last season, I was, I guess I was so caught up in what people were saying about Cam. I was trying to really get to pay much attention to how good Jonah Williams is, and I think he's right there. I think you can make a case for him 1 or 2. I personally would put Raekwon Davis right there at 1, Jonah Williams at 2. I think a guy like Raekwon Davis, I mean, you talk about a guy who's 6'7", incredibly long arms. I just don't know how you block that guy when he's locked in. You talk about a guy who, he's incredibly long arms. I mean, you're an offensive lineman. How would you even try to block this guy? I don't really know how. I think he's a guy who, when motivated, can be one of the best defensive linemen in the SEC and also in the country. And I think he's going to come out and set the world on fire this year and be a top draft pick for the upcoming NFL draft.
Yeah, when he does it right, it's extremely hard to block a guy with that much length. Hey, Mark, just real quick before we let you go, we're going to talk about Julio Jones here in a second, him landing at number 4 on the NFL, kind of top 100 list in their own right. Who's your favorite Bama player to watch in the NFL? Do you have one? I mean, it's got to be Julio Jones near the top, but do you look at a guy like Landon Collins or Mark Ingram or anybody else? Like, who's your favorite NFL player from Bama to watch?
Yeah, I think Landon Collins has been a really fun guy to watch because I remember going back to when he came out, his draft last year, a lot of people were sort of questioning what he could do in terms of coverage and different things like that. People were just sort of trying to pencil him in as a box safety or a guy who can only tackle. But he's really become one of the top, 5 or 10 defensive players in the entire NFL. He's just a really incredible talent. I think he's sort of really motivated by that draft slot. He thought he was going to be a first-round guy, flipped to the first pick of that second round that year. So I think he's a guy who's really fun to watch.
Hey, Mark, we appreciate you jumping on with us, buddy, and we'll be sure to keep tabs on you here in the coming weeks, and hope everything's going good for you, man. Thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks.
That's Mark Burnett, formerly of SCCountry.com, and a little bit of a beat writer, free agent in terms of Alabama, but nobody knows Alabama football the way Mark Burnett really does inside and out. A lot of you guys weighing in with some incredible comments here. I'm going to try to get to these real quick before we get on to our next topic. Matt Merle weighing in and saying, Surtain isn't just good, but smart too. G. Grace over on the YouTube comment section saying Auburn was lucky, caught Bama with a buttload of injuries. That's definitely one way of looking at it for sure. They were nicked up at the linebacker, position last year. Victoria Lynn Burnick weighing in saying losing Jay Key when he can punt 70 yards, that hurts. Gave us incredibly good incredibly good situations with opponents in bad field position. Completely agree with that. Dean Mitchell weighing in on the most important first-year starter for Alabama, Joseph Belovis. Now, that's a kicker situation we haven't talked a lot about on this show. We need a consistent kicker, Dean Mitchell kind of saying, so it's going to be really interesting to keep tabs on that. I'm not so sure we won't have 2 different kickers next year, including the new grad transfer from Temple that we're going to be getting there next year. David Hardery weighing in the Facebook comment section. Our pass rush will take some pressure off the secondary. I like this comment from Donald and Brittany Schultz. All rivalry games are intense, and teams always bring their A game against Bama always, even if we beat them by 40. Completely agree with that. That goes on to kind of the next topic of conversation we're talking about here. Now, Sporting News did an interesting thing. This is from Bill Bender over at Sporting News. He named Bama the toughest place to play since 2010. And this goes along. This is like a long article he was writing about the toughest places to play, really, in different situations and different time periods. I think we have the kind of graphic to show you of what he wanted to say about Alabama and what it's like playing at Bryant-Denny Stadium. There you see BDS, the toughest place to play since 2010. Nick Saban's machine has produced a 52-4 record at home since 2010, including a nation-leading 92.8 win percentage. And those 4 losses, they came against Auburn in 2010, LSU in 2011, Texas A&M in 2012, and Ole Miss in 2015. Some of the most exciting games in recent college football history. And remember, 2 of those teams had Heisman Trophy winners at quarterback. Now, I do love that list, and obviously you're going to highlight the fact that they're 52-4 since 2010. The question I have for Bill Bender in this list, why didn't you go back 2 more years? Why can't we go back 10 seasons? There were 7-0 in 2009, 2008. Not a little bit of a humble brag talking about my own 2 teams back on some of those fields, but why not go back 10 years? Why don't we have to cap that at 8 seasons? He names a couple of other teams on his list there. Last year's biggest home field advantage, Auburn. Obviously, Bama fans know a ton about that. The last 4 years has been Clemson and Death Valley. The last, since 2010, like I said, has been Alabama at Bryant-Denny. Last 15 years, they kind of weigh in and say Ohio State has been the toughest place to play. Now, obviously, we've all, most of us has probably been to Bryant-Denny Stadium and understand that it's a tough place to play. I do have a little bit of a head scratcher, like I said, that Bill Bender didn't go back 2 more years and just say the last 10 years, because that makes Alabama 66-4 over the last 10 years at home, and definitely something kind of worth noting. Dean Mitchell, Derrick Henry is my favorite to watch in the NFL, going back to the question we talked about with Mark Burnett just a second ago. And that's a great leeway because we do want to highlight. Now, we don't talk about the NFL all the time on the show. Rarely ever do we talk about the NFL. We'll probably do some more of that sometime in the future if we get a chance to here in the fall. But I do want to highlight the fact that Julio Jones was named the 4th best player in the NFL yesterday. Now, Julio Jones is a guy that luckily I got to play a couple years with in college, got to play 4 years with in the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons. Incredible teammate, incredible guy. Really is one of those guys that comes to work every day. I used to tell my teammates all the time, this guy's going to be the best blocking wide receiver in the NFL before he ever gets a chance to be the best pass-catching wide receiver. But obviously, he's done some incredible things in terms of what he's been able to match up with Matt Ryan, Mohamed Sanu. Calvin Ridley's going to get a chance to play next to him this coming season. So now we didn't have the NFL Network presentation of the top 100 players. Julio Jones being named at number 4. If you guys get a chance, go watch that. Hayshawn Clinton-Dix had some interesting things to say about matching off against Julio Jones. But what's the next best thing? Wanted to highlight a little bit of what Julio meant during his time at Alabama. This is my senior season playing LSU at Bryant-Denny Stadium back in 2009, one of those wins I just mentioned. Watch how fast Julio Jones comes out of this shotgun right here after he catches this screen pass. This is Julio Jones against LSU and Bryant-Denny in 2009 right here.
27, Trent Richardson behind the quarterback. McElroy looks right, throws the screen left. Julio left side. He's behind the defense. 40, 30, 20. 10, 5, 73 yards, touchdown! There are no flags on the play. 73-yard touchdown. How about that? Well, Julio,
boy, that's some incredible stuff right there, too, as you kind of get to see it from another angle right there. A little bit of play action off the power. You can see William Vallejos and Barrett Jones and James Carpenter out there laying those blocks. And Julio running about a 4.0140 all the way to the end zone right there. And Eli Gold on the call. That always gives you chills. Shannon Burgess saying, Shannon Burgess, our LSU fan over the YouTube comment section, saying, it feels like yesterday. He's an athletic freak, makes me nervous when he's healthy playing the Saints. Absolutely agree with that. Terrence Branion kind of saying chills every time. Terrence Branion also weighing in saying the screen pass. Lindsey Page saying, I see you. Yeah, I can be caught on that film somewhere too. I didn't do much. I was part of the play action going the opposite direction, but still, nonetheless, good times being able to watch that film and think back all the way to 2009. So appreciate you guys following along with us today. Obviously, we'll be back tomorrow for the Wednesday edition of Roll Tide Daily here at 1 o'clock Eastern, noon Central Time. As a reminder, for those of y'all that like to watch SEC Country live this afternoon, we'll be back on, myself and Brandon Adams at 3 o'clock Eastern Time on the SEC Country Facebook page. But until then, I hope you guys have a great Tuesday. We'll catch you back, like I said, right here tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. You guys have a good Tuesday and Roll Tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.